They changed it.
Who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid.
Bill Maher hasn't held back when it comes to criticizing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. While he wasn't especially supportive of her in the beginning, her outspoken progressive stance and public remarks seem to have pushed him even further in the opposite direction, and across several heated episodes of Real Time with Bill Maher, the sharp-tongued host has taken direct aim at her in a tone that's bold, biting, and impossible to ignore. So if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because we're heading straight.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness. To which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and have been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club.
Despite her strong association with progressive politics, some critics argue that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is beginning to seem increasingly out of touch with reality. The New York lawmaker once openly embraced the label woke, wearing it proudly at protests and rallies across her state as if it represented the peak of moral clarity. But as the political climate has shifted, the term is now often used by opponents to describe a mindset they believe has drifted away from common ground. And in response, she appears to be subtly adjusting her approach, toning down her image and creating distance from the very ideology she once championed. Yet Bill Maher isn't letting that slide, and on Real Time with Bill Maher, he tackles it directly, calling out what he sees as clear shifts and contradictions in her stance with a delivery that is forceful.
Great strategy, never missing an opportunity to remind voters how lame and clueless and hopelessly uncool they are, especially since those are the ones who actually vote. But okay, fine. What word would you like us to use for the plainly insane excesses of the left that are not liberalism, but something completely different? Because you can't have that word liberal from us and think it should cover things like canceling Lincoln and teaching third graders their oppressors. That's all your new thing.
This is exactly why Bill Maher connects with such a wide audience, because he doesn't tone down his message or wrap it in polite language. He says what others hesitate to say. The decision by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to step away from the label woke brings up deeper questions, especially about how to describe the more controversial ideas linked to that way of thinking, as concepts that have been pushed into mainstream conversations for years, such as debates around gender identity, youth, decision-making, and fairness in sports, remain difficult for many people to fully accept, and these views are often grouped under what critics call woke culture. So even if the label changes, the core ideas don't simply disappear, and Maher's argument is clear and direct. Rebranding doesn't remove the underlying concerns, and those issues will continue to be questioned and challenged.
The message to you was, I'm an American now. I'm here. Be my lawyer, not the lawyer for the migrants showing up in my backyard. Every month I see a new poll reporting how much Latinos despise the woke term Latinx. It's about as popular with them as a reboot of Speedy Gonzales. Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language.
I clearly remember a time when progressive voices strongly promoted the term Latinx, supported by figures like Gavin Newsom and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, presenting it as modern and inclusive, even though many within the Latino community responded with confusion and, in many cases, outright rejection. Surveys and street interviews consistently showed that a large portion of the very people it was meant to represent didn't connect with the label, yet the push continued, giving the impression that activists were speaking over the same communities they claimed to support, and eventually a shift began to take shape. As criticism grew louder and harder to dismiss, Newsom appeared to pull back, softening his stance and largely avoiding the term, while AOC continued to defend it, insisting that language changes over time, though many people saw that response as dismissive and out of touch. And these moments did more than just stir debate, they slowly chipped away at trust building. Frustration that, over time, carried all the way to the ballot box.
More of them now than ever are identifying as Republican. So are Asian Americans, whose support for Democrats is down 16 points since the last election. A lot of that is because, in the name of achieving equity in schools, Democrats in deep blue cities have made it a mission to eliminate the advanced programs at which Asian kids excel. Asian parents said, okay, I wish all kids well, not a racist, but I need someone who acts like my lawyer.
Here, Bill Maher suggests that some Asian and Latino voters are being pushed toward the Republican Party, in part due to the messaging of figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He argues that this isn't a sudden political shift, but something building over time out of frustration, as many people in these communities feel talked down to and are growing weary of symbolic gestures and surface-level outreach that don't improve their everyday lives, placing greater value instead on safer neighborhoods, stronger schools for their children, a stable and growing economy, and leadership that delivers real, measurable results rather than rhetoric or cultural signaling. And Maher's point is that when politicians appear more focused on abstract ideas than pressing concerns, they risk distancing the very groups they claim to represent. And once that sense of trust begins to fade, voters don't just express dissatisfaction. They start looking elsewhere for leaders who feel more grounded and responsive to their needs.
Who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader. But this is the thing the Republican Party has to understand too. Both parties lost in the last election. Trump won, okay? And I don't know if that's going to transfer.
I'm not entirely sure what Kevin McCarthy is trying to achieve here, but one thing is clear. If figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders were to take control of the Democratic Party, it could raise serious questions about election outcomes. They undeniably draw massive crowds and generate intense excitement, with rallies full of energetic, vocal, and devoted supporters. Yet recent elections have highlighted a key reality: large audiences don't always translate into votes, and outcomes are rarely decided by short-lived momentum, something that has been seen before, especially in 2024 when endorsements, celebrity appearances, and packed events created the impression of overwhelming support. But when Election Day arrived, the results told a different story, making the takeaway simple: enthusiasm alone isn't enough to win. And lasting success depends on policies that reach beyond a core base, thoughtful strategy, and a message that connects with a broader audience. Because without that wider appeal, even the strongest excitement falls short.
The top of that ticket, Kevin, because if it's not Bernie, he's going to be vice president and wait his turn.
No, Bernie's been running each time. I'm just saying who's in the lead right now. I don't think that's how it ends up.
But big crowds don't necessarily mean who's the right candidate. You know, when I started...
No, but it drives where the ideas are going to go. It's going to drive the money for a while.
It doesn't make him the winner.
It doesn't make it the winner. You'll have to wait till you get 2 years out, and then you'll start seeing these governors that start showing solutions. You also have to know, what is the issue going to be? Are we going to have a foreign policy issue? Are we going to have an economic issue? And who's been the best in leading in that? But right now, for the Democrats, who's going to lead for the next 2 years, the money is going to... AOC outraised everybody in the House.
And it's all small now.
It's all small.
And this kind of criticism is often aimed at Democrats, because in the end, it's not just about who can raise the most money. It never really was. Take Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton as examples, as during a recent election cycle, Clinton brought in an enormous amount of campaign funding in a short time after becoming the Democratic nominee, with headline-grabbing numbers creating a sense of unstoppable momentum. Yet when voters finally made their decisions, that financial edge didn't translate into a win, leading to one of the most striking political losses in recent memory. And the lesson is simple. Money can boost a message, but it can't fix a weak one. And no amount of funding or polished campaigning can win over voters on its own, because people are looking for authenticity, clarity, and policies that truly connect with their everyday lives. And without that foundation, even the most well-funded campaign can come up short when it matters most.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want.
Bill Maher points out that there are many voters in this region, and figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Zoran Mamdani are often grouped together, as mainstream Democrats and democratic socialists are frequently treated as if they are the same, though that isn't entirely accurate, since their positions tend to align more closely with democratic socialism, which supports a larger role for government in shaping social and economic outcomes, even while operating within the Democratic Party. And this distinction matters, especially for voters who are cautious about policies they see as too far to the left, as critics argue that these ideological differences show up clearly in the policies and priorities they support, sometimes putting them at odds with a broader audience. And in that context, Maher's warning stands out, with many believing that if AOC were leading the ticket, the party could lose support at the polls and risk creating a divide with more moderate voters.
The DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal? It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
Bill Maher delivers a sharp critique here, arguing that there isn't a clear path to victory for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He points out that while her positions can generate strong support from passionate followers, leaning too heavily into what critics call woke politics and democratic socialist ideas risks alienating centrist voters, the very group that often decides national elections, framing the challenge as a tension between political reality and ideological purity. And he highlights policies associated with states like New York, such as expanded public benefits that opponents worry might include free early education for undocumented immigrants, as well as initiatives championed by figures like Zoran Mamdani before municipal elections, including more free public transit, as examples that amplify these concerns, ultimately making a straightforward point. Such policies shape voter perceptions, and those perceptions frequently determine election outcomes, regardless of how fair the process may be.